Well, welcome everybody to another episode of Real Talk, where we talk to local real estate leaders, professionals to understand sort of their background and how they've gotten where they've gotten. And today I'm excited to interview my friend John Sieling. John, welcome to the program. Say hi to everybody.
Thank you, Evan. Hi, everybody.
John is a veteran realtor, currently with Branch Real Estate, also a volunteer in the local association, and that's where John and I initially met. But he's got some great stories, some great background, and certainly a unique professional in terms of how he serves his clients. So let's learn more about that. So again, John, thank you for joining us today. And where I want to start is your early life. You grew up in San Carlos, California, which you informed me was also the birthplace of Barry Bonds. Didn't know that until you shared that. But you were the oldest of seven siblings. So off the bat, you were forced into a leadership position. Tell us about your upbringing and growing up in San Carlos.
I think the leadership part was mostly learning how to change diapers on my younger siblings. Thus, no fear of babies when they came around for us. San Carlos was a big move for us. My father transferred with Kaiser. He was a neurosurgeon, and they had just started a neurosurgery unit there in 1972. We came out from sunny Southern California. I thought, oh my God, it just rained all the time. And then I moved to Portland eventually, right? But the experience was an excellent one. Quickly made a lot of friends, got involved in sports. It was kind of a sleepy town for a while. The computer revolution really didn't punch things up until probably the late 70s, early 80s. So I went to high school at San Carlos High. Yes, you noted one of our um, notable residents, although Barry went to one of the local Catholic high schools, but we also had Jennifer Granholm, who was Biden's Secretary of Energy. She was also
Ah,
governor of Michigan twice. We also had the well-known comedian Greg Proops,
okay.
uh, who was the British version of Whose Line Is It Anyway,
Ah,
and
yeah,
a
okay.
voice they used frequently in some of the other Star Wars films, I think four, five, and six. So um, got involved in sports, got involved in the community over time. We did have kids there. We've got twin boys that are right now 34. One lives here in Portland, and our daughter lives here as well. Um, I think that what I learned as the oldest is that you got to do a lot for yourself. Your parents are going to focus on other things, and life's moving pretty fast. I went away to college, and when some of my siblings were very little, and came back to be around them as kind of this quasi-adult, not quite a mentor, but a friend to have around, and. Pursued my professional life. My wife and I lived there for about 27 years, or owned a home, same home, for about 27 years, and benefited from the Silicon Valley boom.
Yeah, right on. Well, so your parents have influenced, I mean, everyone's parents have influenced them in some way or the other, and certainly no different for you. You described your dad as being a disciplined, curious person, forward-thinking mindset. Also, sort of was your introduction into music. And one of the things I like to shape or at least highlight is you're much more than a realtor and a professional. You have your own personal interests and hobbies and things you like to do, and music has been influential on your life. So, your dad, share that. What was your dad? How did your dad influence you and introduce you to music?
Absolutely. Yeah, he was a music fan. He grew up in central Minnesota, pretty quiet, staid area, only child, but had a pretty intense interest in music. My uncle, who lives up in Coeur d'Alene, who's also a doctor, my mom's brother, would say that when he went and visited my dad at the University of Minnesota Medical School, my dad always had the coolest stereo stuff, and that was kind of the beginning of a relationship with music. With for him, when he and mom moved to Los Angeles in 1960 61. dad and mom went to a lot of concerts. And over time, of course, as we got older, we were listening to the music that he had on vinyl, like the Doors, like the Stones, like Jefferson Airplane. Dad was big on that, and we just loved it. We especially loved the Simon and Garfunkel albums that he had. So that
Cool.
was big. That was big on us. You know, he had a very, very strong desire to see whatever he could see. He drove my mom up to the Monterey Pop Festival in 1968 in their two-seater Morgan, which is, you know, if you've ever ridden in an old 50s era Morgan, it's like one of the worst experiences. You might as well just ride in an ox cart. So dad was big on that. Dad influenced us big time. And of course, you know, one of the reasons, one of the check boxes for Tony and I moving up to the Portland area was what was the music scene like? And that was an easy one to check.
Yeah, yeah, right on, right on. Well, and your mom also has had influence on you as well. She was very involved in the local community, the school board. Tell us about your mom.
Absolutely. She is, you know, always a passionate vocal fan for her kids. Mom was probably the loudest screamer whenever any of us were playing team sports, whatever it might have been. She was also very passionate about the education system. She did have her credentials in that space. She ran for high school board trustee and served 4 different terms for what was called the Sequoia Union High School district, which is kind of the mid peninsula from about Palo Alto up to about San Mateo. So she really, you know, put a lot of time and effort and was very passionate. In 1981, they were looking to close our high school. I'd been gone for a little while, but this is a great lesson in trusting, you know, be careful of trusting your own numbers. The district was convinced that the enrollment in the district was going down. So they made a strategic decision to close the newest high school in the district. It had been built in 1963. And we fought it, and we fought it as best as we could. And my mom was one of the leaders in fighting that effort. And she, you know, rightly so. She and many other people were right in opposing it because not maybe 15 years later, this district was screaming about needing another high school because, wow, they didn't figure out that there was going to be a lot of people moving from out of the area into the peninsula and into the Bay Area to work in the computer industry, and they just believed their own data. They only surveyed their own residents, and that was a mistake. So mom fought hard against that. She really, you know, has always been very cognizant of politics. You know, my mom was always a kind of a reliable Republican. Dad was always a reliable. I'm not sure what. Because he never necessarily voted for a president. He always voted for, I think this guy is Harry Smith, who was the leader of the longshoremen in San Francisco back in the 20s. So dad had a bit of irony in him.
Fun.
But mom worked really hard. She was, you know, again, passionate supporter of us kids. And, you know, she played a big role in our lives.
Well, I mean, you,
And still does.
yeah, well, as I mentioned in the introduction, I mean, you've been since moving up here and since when I met you, you have been actively involved in the local association of realtors, primarily in the realtor advocacy and some of the local political things that are there. And I can just see that carried forward, right? The importance because whenever we're in a meeting or a committee or interviewing a candidate, you're always, you know, bringing forth thoughtful questions aimed at, hey, can I really try to understand how this person's trying to improve our community? So I see that live on in you, which is awesome. Now, I also want to focus on you have a great story about your dad is being a forward thinker and his approach to Vietnam. So share that with us.
Well, you know, at the beginning, he knew that in 1967 he was probably going to be drafted. Wasn't sure, you know, but he was pretty sure he'd go. So he picked the service he wanted to go into, which was the Air Force. And for a doctor at that point, it was a 2-year hitch, 1 year in the States and 1 year in country. So he made that call. That's not an easy one, Mom. You know, there was 5 of us on the ground already, and he had to, but he knew that would happen. So he shipped us off to live with his parents in Minnesota for a year, which was fun. You know, we learned what it was like to live in the Midwest, you know, with deep snow and humid summers and all that kind of good stuff. And mom had been raised there as well, so you know, it wasn't hard for her to do that. So it was an easy thing for us to do to live there. Dad was it was a very eye-opening experience from going from private practice to working in the military, and even going from a U.S. based hospital, the March Air Force Base outside of Riverside, to Cam Ranh Bay in Vietnam, which was a combo naval and Air Force base. But in the States, your job was to absolutely do I don't know, heroics, not maybe the right word, but pretty intense surgery to save the patient. Whereas in Cam Bay, in country, your job was to stabilize them so they could be shipped back to the States. That's a different equation. That's a different emotional investment on the part of the doctor, not to do the scale of heroic surgery. I mean, that's care, right? That you're expressing your care for your patient in the techniques that you're using, and that was hard to slow down on that. But it was a very instructive experience for him. I think that it shaped his decision why being in private practice wasn't the best thing. That's why he enjoyed going to Kaiser. So he knew what was going on, and and kind of bring it full circle. He's always a big advocate of technology. There's when he passed, we were finding stuff was like, what did he buy this for? But it's the kind of stuff he enjoyed doing.
But the point is that by signing up proactively, he avoided the draft and avoided having to be on the front lines. And funny enough, like my father, we share a similar story in that. My dad grew up here in Portland, went to Sunset High School, and was a highly touted football player, and had a chance to go play at all these places. And he ended up electing to go to the Air Force Academy, knowing that he could play football, but also avoid the draft. Right? He could enter in as a pilot and reservist and all that. So funny that we share that.
Cool.
Um, so okay, so you graduate from high school and you attend California State University at Chico. You graduate right into one of the worst recessions of, in time. So what was it like? And tell us about the first part of your career path out of college and where that began to take you. It wasn't real estate initially.
Absolutely. It was very humbling. I'd done a 6 month internship at outfit called Raychem in Menlo Park. That was it's under the radar for most people, but they were mostly known for the thermally conductive plastics that warmed things like the Alaska pipeline when they built that. It was a big deal, and I spent 6 months doing that. I thought that was my career track. I thought I was in pretty good shape to get out and go work in that space. And there just weren't any jobs. I went up and down the West Coast. Obviously, this is pre-internet, but I went by I physically walked into different plastic plants and handed in my resume, and nothing ever came of that. From LA all the way up here to all the way up to San Francisco. So that was pretty humbling. I made a turn into I actually worked. I assisted managed a large liquor store chain, one particular store. They were kind of like Liquor Barn, if you ever remember that, or Total Wine, I guess it'd be the better
Sure.
analogy. And then got into technology for a little bit, working but more specifically, I worked for a computer game company. You wouldn't recognize any of the games now. They're just almost laughable compared to what we play with these days.
Sure.
But it did bring me around to the publishing business by a kind of circuitous route. And I ended up running the sales staff for GamePro magazine, which was probably the biggest video game magazine of the era back in the 8-bit and the 16-bit days. Had a lot of fun with that. Publishing was a great business. It started a career in that era. I worked on a couple of different properties. The only thing outside of that category would have been running the West Coast sales team for the Financial Times, which, if people aren't familiar with it, is basically the rest of the world's Wall Street Journal.
Sure.
They
Yep.
call it the pink one, and or pinkin if you're a Brit. And advertising really opened my mind to and my exposure to marketing. That taught me about things like, who is your audience? Who are you trying to talk to? How do you talk to them? Where do you talk to them? Which has been really invaluable to me in my real estate career because it's pretty easy just to rely on the MLS and throw something out there and let it happen. I mean, that can happen. But if you're dealing with more difficult properties or more challenging or more notable, including one I have right now up on Larch Mountain in Corbett, it's a $1.6 million, 5,000 square foot estate with probably the most amazing view of the Columbia Gorge. There are probably other views like that, but this one's stunning. How do you reach the target market for that? Who's going to buy that kind of home? What do we do beyond that in terms of marketing? How much effort do you put into agents that sell that type of property? How much effort do you put into marketing to other agents in other regions, whether it's Park City, Utah, or Jackson Hole or San Francisco? And how do you talk to them? So that's been valuable in that regards. And I think that the reason I'm in real estate now is because I became kind of the graybeard. I still have my graybeard, but even back then in 2004, I was a graybeard, and I said, I need to do something where I'm more in control of my destiny and my schedule, and age isn't going to time me out. I mean, my own lack of ability will time me out, but if I stay sharp, work with smart people like Evan Swanson, then
I don't know about that.
I will last in the business. And I can basically call the day when I split. I can also put in the amount of work it takes to pay my bills and to save money. Tom Hopkins, who's an old sales trainer, always used to say, real estate is the worst paid easy work and the best paid hard work. So
Mhm.
if you keep working hard at it and try to be smart about it, you'll do okay.
Yeah.
So very happy to be where I am right now.
Well, again, what I like to bring out in these interviews is how you as a realtor, and you're a top performing realtor, how your past experiences have shaped and influenced where you've gotten today. And in our pre-interview, you mentioned that your career in advertising, and I want to repeat this because you kind of glossed over it, but you spent, I think, 20 plus years in the advertising space, started off at a relatively small publication, but you ended up running the West Coast sales team for the Financial Times. And yes, if anyone who's ever spent any time in economics or finance absolutely knows what the Financial Times is. And so that's a big job. You were managing, I can imagine, a lot of people. It's a very high revenue profile job. But you mentioned there's three ways that it's influenced you. Number one is preparation. When you come into client meetings, when you come into situations, you're always prepared because your previous career, you had to be. Number two, understanding your client's motivation, right? So, what is it that's truly driving them? What are they actually looking for? And then the third one, and this is, easy to say, but really, really hard to practice, is that trust and tactical empathy of really trying to get in the mindset, and feel what your clients are feeling so that you can help them, right? And I just, in preparing for this, there was one review that came out, and I think it really speaks to this. So if you don't mind, I'm going to just read this, but these are some clients you work with a while back. We've had the pleasure of working with John for the past 7 years, and we couldn't be more satisfied with his service. As very picky clients, we greatly appreciate his patience and accommodation every time we wanted to look at a home. John truly went above and beyond to ensure we found the perfect place, and his dedication paid off when he led us to our dream home. John is not only professional, but also a very genuine individual who always has his client's best interest in mind. His expertise and commitment made the home buying process smooth and enjoyable. So, again, I think it really highlights it because um, there's not a lot of real estate professionals that would be willing to invest 7 years in a client, right? They would just write them off. B, when you're working with very picky clients, these are the ones that you really truly have to tune into and understand. And I've been on this, I've been on the side of seeing clients fire realtors before because they didn't think that their realtor was listening to them. And in this case, clearly you were. So yeah, I mean, I feel like, maybe you want to touch on it, John, but like how did all that time in media and advertising sales really prepare you for the success you've had in real estate?
Well, the 3 points you brought up, I think really do resonate. Being prepared, being empathetic, really listening to what your clients are looking for. This is a very personal decision for them. And that extends to investment properties, but let's just stick to residential. They're going to live there. They're making their life. They're making a very important decision about what, where they want to live, how they want to live. So you really need to listen and ask a lot of questions and keep asking questions and keep asking questions because a lot of times, as you know, Evan, clients will tell you one thing, and I'm not throwing people under the bus, or this is not a slight. They'll tell you one thing, but they end up doing something else.
Totally.
And that's okay. I never call anybody on that. You just turn the wheel and go
That's right.
that way because that's what they want to do. It happens easily a third of the time when I'm working with a buyer. Um, so listening is so important, and asking a lot of questions is very important. I need people to trust that I have their best interests in mind. A great trainer that I've read recently uses the phrase, and I use the phrase because I think it's important at very critical junctures. It's, look, I'm not attached to the outcome.
Hmm.
However this plays out, that's great. It's your decision. Because we suffer from a little bit of a shading that we're only interested in the commissions. The commissions only come from doing good work, period. If you are focused on the commission, then you will not be focused on your client. So if you focused on the mission and getting the job done, the commissions will follow, not only from that transaction, but from the referrals, which is even the most important part, because trust is the core of that. And trust, as David Brooks likes to say, is reciprocity coded with emotion. You're exchanging something. I trust you, you trust me, but it's a little, it's a 1 + 1 = 3 kind of mathematical equation. You are creating something a bit more special, and you stay in touch with people after that. After you've done a good job, they're either referring people to you, or they're going to call you up and then when they sell that home and move to the next one. And it could happen in a very surprisingly fast sequence. But that's how real estate works if you want to stay in the business. There's no magic beyond that. Do good work, take care of people, ask for referrals, ask for just to stay in touch, and
Hmm.
it works.
Yeah. Well, I love that quote, by the way. I'm not tied to the outcome. Make the decision that's best for you. And one of the things about working in the real estate space, the mortgage space, is that we don't charge people by the hour as an advisor. We act as one,
Right.
but we don't always, get compensated for our time. And what ends up happening naturally is that I think in some instances, if you're working on a transaction that's headed towards a bad outcome for the client, they may feel some obligation to stay in it because they feel like they owe you. And what I love about that is that it demonstrates, which is who you are, that guys, don't take my compensation out of this. This has nothing to do with anything. We want what's best for you. And if that means moving forward with this house, great. If it doesn't, no problem. We'll look for another one. But giving them that space and that confidence to feel that way is huge as an advisor that you are. Okay, so let's talk about that. So let's talk about real estate for a second. Now, you originally got licensed all the way back in 1985, but you ended up making the full-time jump to real estate 20 years later. Is that right? In
Yeah.
2005.
Yeah.
So, who was the friend that encouraged you to get licensed back in 1985? Do you remember their name?
The friend that encouraged me to get licensed.
I thought you had
Um,
someone in 1985 say, "Ah, yeah, you ought to get your real estate license."
no, I was kind of burnt out on
Okay,
working in the business world, and
okay.
I thought, well, real estate's kind of interesting. Maybe check this out. And I answered an ad for a guy that was doing mostly investment stuff, and he was a good guy. He wasn't a real pop in office. It was a guy who came out of finance and very staid financial background and became a realtor and started his own company, both selling real estate and doing property management. But it was really kind of my own desire to be, kind of like that early itch to be independent.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. Right on. But then continued to work in media and then dove in 2005 and you were very complimentary of Keller Williams when you started in immersing yourself in the system. So what was that time like? This is 2005 and you're still in the Bay Area at this point.
Right. And I was actually doing a little bit of a hybrid thing. Getting into real estate, people will tell you better have about 6 months of savings rolled up because it's going to take a little while for you to make some money. I mean, yeah,
Mhm.
there's going to be the offshoot person who starts making money right away, but I think there's something like 3 million realtors in the United States. That's going to be a real small number of that bunch. So I was on contract with a friend of mine who'd started a technology website selling advertising. Actually, it wasn't necessarily advertising, it was more like they were selling leads, selling white papers and things like that. So I was
Mhm.
able to split time between doing that and real estate and did pretty good. So it was like a 3 year um,
Transition period.
transition that I did that worked out pretty good. Worked for a small local brand at first, then decided I wanted to go work for the top office and it turned out to be a Remax office in our town. They actually sold out at one point and became a Sotheby's office, which
Mm.
was interesting. I got to see different models and how that all worked out. But I did get frustrated at one point, and had some friends some very good friends and very successful agents working at Keller, and I said, let's give it a shot. I really appreciated the fact that one of the first things they preach is this is a business. You need to run it like a business. They teach you systems, they teach you numbers. It gets um, what would you call it, insulted sometimes as a cultish thing. It's not. There are many really really successful realtors in the Portland market and people like Morgan Davis and Cam Dersham and Chris Dawkins who are far from any sort of cultish member. They are strong, independent, smart realtors of different flavors and work in different categories and could easily go out on their own, but they like that type of environment. So that was a really good environment to work in. I enjoyed working with those guys. And I've worked, I've kind of scaled that back to a smaller firm because I'm more of a small guy, small footprint type of person, working with Adam Kaplan, who's an outstanding broker on his own, very successful in our market. So, but I do owe a lot to the Keller system. That's some really good education. Yeah, I would recommend just about anybody looking to get into the business to perhaps look at starting there. Although there's probably other programs at Windermere or Coldwell Banker that are equally beneficial, but Keller's a good place to start.
But the point is, you've taken those systems now and made them your own, and so now you can,
Absolutely.
work anywhere and still benefit from the lessons there. How I got to know you, John, was through community engagement, and as I mentioned earlier, you have volunteered countless hours for the local association of realtors. You're a local director and sit on the board at the moment. You also participate regularly in the realtor advocacy committee. And this, as we talked earlier, is somewhat of an influence from your mom, the civic engagement and wanting to make your community better. You strike me as a naturally curious person, and when we're in some of these meetings, sometimes I'm always marveled that you ask questions that you genuinely want to understand the answer to. And I think sometimes we get caught in our own narratives and we ask questions which are almost rhetorical. But I really do believe that you are asking questions to better understand the person's perspective and in that. Why is that? Why is this part of your life important to you in terms of the community engagement? And how does this help fulfill and tell who you are?
Well, as you can see, and without naming a lot of current events, the world's a messy place, and it's not an easy thing for us to exist as a society. What is that old quote? Democracy is not a great form of government, but it's the best one we have.
Right.
It takes work, and that means citizens need to be participants in that.
Mhm.
Um, it's very hard work to be in government. To be either an elected official or to be a public servant working, for the fire department or the sheriff's department or the housing department, whatever it is. This is hard work. People like to contrast the business world versus the government world. Well, yeah, I get that, but there's the profit motive, and then the motive inside government should be the betterment of the people. So how do we make it better? Well, that's where citizen involvement, citizen oversight comes into play. And the smarter people we have out there, or at least the more people, and I don't want to flatter myself. I don't want to say it that way,
You are, I'll say
but
it. You are a smart
but
guy.
we should be there to ask the questions. That's why to me it's fascinating watching some of these congressional hearings. That's their job, to be the oversight and to be spoken to with disdain by certain members of government. Really is like, that's not how this is supposed to work. I mean it's working in the sense that we have the hearings. So and to reel it back to Portland and the basic, the Portland Metro, it's important for us to know that the people that are going into these jobs have understanding of what they're doing. They know how to make things work. Some of them are, so many of them get on the job training.
Hmm.
It's just the way it is. It's
Hmm.
about making deals. It's about finding money to pay for things, all those kind of good things. And a lot of them don't know anything about that. They're rightly perhaps angry. They're rightly perhaps idealistically driven, and they want to be in these roles. Well, what are you going to do? Do you
Hmm.
know how to get this kind of stuff done? Because this is not business. This is a
Hmm.
different thing. This is about having relationships. This is about figuring out where you can move these mountains and being involved like we are. We have a unique position as realtors. We are in the Portland Metro, at least 7,000 small business people that help enable and catalyze other small businesses. Our work gets painters, builders, lenders, insurance people, on and on and on. There's work that gets stimulated by the work that we do.
Hmm.
So having a little bit of a purview into the politics and the people that are driving that are setting the rules, setting the laws that affect us, the regulations, the funding for housing programs, things like that. I think it's appropriate that we have that play. I wrestle with this every once in a while because, we help fund people's political campaigns, but we're also not a corporation. We are an association of independents, and we, as the Political Action Committee, are acting as a voice for our constituents who are also very in tune to their customers.
Hmm.
We see the world at the street level every day. We're driving the neighborhoods. My wife likes to kid me that I know where every coffee place is. I know where most of them are. Um, and that's because I go into these neighborhoods and I'm going to hang out there and I might work at some random coffee shop because I want to see what the flow is in this area. I want to get a feel for it. The more you know the city, the better you are of value to your customers. So that's why I like doing it, is because I think we all have a responsibility. Everybody should try it, but we all have a responsibility to try to make the world a little bit better place. Being involved in community organizations, community efforts gives you that view. You don't need to do it that much. I've volunteered with TPI with regards to some homeless emergency shelter stuff. What an eye opener that was for me. I didn't, I don't do it all the time. I did it 3 times total, but that really taught me a lot about what's going on in the homeless space and about the
Hmm.
services that are there to work there. So, excuse me, being involved, we're not going to move the needle right away, but I think we represent our clients who in a world where they probably don't feel comfortable participating.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love it. I mean, again, I think hearing that is just reinforces what I already know about you, which is that you get involved. You want to make things better, but again, you don't go in with an agenda, right? You don't have your own ideals. I mean, you have ideals and have a value system and all that, but you're not pushing an agenda. You're going in with a curious mind to be informed. And that helps you become a better realtor, advisor to your clients. It helps you, participate, make the community better. And for all those reasons, it's no surprise you've had the success you've had. So, well, John, I warned you of this, so let's hear it. But one of the final question I always ask my guests on this show is, if you could go back in time and whisper in your ear a piece of advice on the first day that you started in real estate, what advice would you give yourself?
Have a plan. We get into it and we think that, let's just go sell some houses. Well, have a plan. It's so important because you are a small business and small bit, yeah, there's a lot of people that have just succeeded by the seat of their pants, but you need a plan for a lot of things. And specifically, and this is going to, if anybody outside of real estate, this sounds super real estate nerdy, but lead generation is, this is a Keller, tenant. Lead generation is perhaps one of the most important things you can put as much muscle behind. You need to understand where your customers are going to come from. So do a thorough study about that. Um, Understand if you don't have certain people in your customer target set, how are you going to reach them? Do you want to reach them? Understand what that's all about because um, this is, what I counsel younger agents is you have two things in this business that you need to maximize and not waste, and that's time and that's money. Well, at first you don't have a lot of money, so you got to maximize your time, and that time is best focused on finding your lead, who you're going to do business with, and how you're talking to them, and how you would develop that. And if you don't spend that time, then you're just going to flail around until you kind of catch some traction to get going. So really, really, really plan and really, really plan your lead generation.
Love it. Love it. Well, John, thank you for being our guest today. Again, John Sieling with Branch Real Estate, longtime realtor and engaged citizen. We appreciate you in this community, John. Thank you for all that you do, and thank you for being a guest on our show.
Absolutely. And Evan, really appreciate our partnership. It's been a pleasure, turning folks over to you. I've got a busy plate and I feel very confident when I say, hey, text him Evan's number, say, give this guy a call. He'll take care of you.
Perfect. Thanks, John. So if you want to reach out to John, you can find him online. Just Google John Sieling, Branch Real Estate. And thank you so much for watching.
All right. Thank you.